father traded his fat daughter for a horse to Mountain Man, but he gave her something priceless. $50 for the horse, the farmer slurred, his breath thick with whiskey. Or, take the girl instead. She eats more than she's worth. Laughter rippled through the cattle market of Red Rock, Wyoming. The autumn sun beat down on sweat, dust, and cruelty. Men paused from counting hides to gawk at the sight. A trembling girl with round cheeks, soft brown hair, and eyes full of shame. Her name was Mabel Caldwell, 19 years old, and she'd just been bartered like livestock. Her father, Jeremiah Caldwell, once a respected rancher, now a ruin of a man, staggered toward the rugged stranger he'd just addressed. "What'll it be, Mountain Man?" he jeered, waving his bottle. "My girl or the horse?" The man in question, Isaiah Zeke Brennan, towered over the crowd, his frame carved by years of wilderness living. His coat was worn, his beard unkempt, his eyes steel gray and unreadable. The crowd leaned in. Someone muttered, "He won't take her. Ain't no man stupid enough." But Zeke didn't answer right away. His gaze moved from the broken father to the girl. Her torn dress, the tears trembling on her lashes, the way she tried to disappear behind her own shadow. After a long silence, he spoke, his voice deep and steady. "I'll take her." Gasps swept through the onlookers. Mabel's father grinned, shoving her toward Zeke as if unloading cargo. "She's all yours, Mountain Man. Good luck feeding her." The laughter came again, crueler, sharper. Zeke's jaw flexed. He took the horse's reins in Mabel's trembling hand, saying only, "Get in the wagon." And just like that, the crowd watched in stunned silence as the girl no one wanted was taken away, not as a purchase, but as something far more mysterious. The wagon rolled out of Red Rock while the crowd's laughter still echoed behind them. Dust swirled around the wheels, mixing with the smoke from the blacksmith's forge and the scent of cattle. Mabel sat silently on the wooden bench beside the Mountain Man, her hands clenched in her lap, her face burning with humiliation. She had imagined many endings to her life, none as cruel as this. Traded for a horse, her own father's words, "She eats more than she's worth," rang in her ears like a curse. Zeke didn't speak for miles. His jaw was set hard, eyes fixed on the trail ahead. His silence made her even more uneasy. What kind of man agreed to take a woman this way? What kind of life waited for her in the wilderness? When the wagon hit a bump, Mabel gasped, clutching the edge of her seat. Zeke glanced at her briefly, then back at the road. His voice, when it came, was calm but firm. "You hungry?" She shook her head quickly. "No, sir." "Don't call me sir," he muttered. "Name's Zeke." She hesitated. "Mabel." "I know." Silence stretched again, filled only by the creak of wheels and the call of distant crows. She risked a glance at him. His hands were large, scarred from years of work. His eyes, though cold, didn't seem cruel. There was something heavy in them, something that spoke of loss, more than anger. By dusk, the road curved into the foothills. Pines rose tall on both sides, and the smell of wild sage filled the air. Mabel had never been so far from town. Her heart pounded as the last trace of civilization disappeared behind them. "Where are we going?" she asked softly. "Home," Zeke said simply. When they finally arrived, the cabin appeared through the trees, small but sturdy, smoke curling from the chimney. The yard was neatly fenced, with a chopping block, a woodpile, and a stable behind. It was a lonely place, but not a cruel one. Zeke stopped the wagon and climbed down. "Come on." Mabel hesitated. "What? What do you want me to do?" He looked at her, not like a man appraising a possession, but like someone trying to find the right words. "You're not here to work off some debt," he said. "You're here because I couldn't stand by and watch what he did." Tears welled in her eyes. "You didn't have to take me." "Maybe not." His voice softened. "But I couldn't let him sell his daughter like a mule." He led her inside. The cabin smelled of pine and wood smoke, and though sparsely furnished, it was warm and clean. He pointed to a small room off the main one. "That's yours. You can lock it from the inside." She stared at him, confused. "You mean I don't have to?" "No," he interrupted gently. "You don't owe me anything. You're safe here." Mabel's lips trembled. For the first time that day, she allowed herself to cry. Quietly, desperately, into her hands. Zeke didn't move to comfort her. He simply turned toward the fire, his back to her, giving her the dignity of her tears. Outside, the wind sighed through the pines, carrying away the last echo of the market's laughter. And in its place, something fragile began to take root, the first hint of trust. The following morning, Mabel woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of chopping wood outside. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The soft light filtering through the small window, the steady rhythm of an axe splitting logs, it all felt strangely peaceful. Then the memories rushed back. The market, her father, the trade. She sat up slowly, wrapping the wool blanket tighter around herself. On the table by the door sat a tin plate with warm biscuits and honey. She stared at it for a long time before whispering, "He cooked for me." When she stepped outside, Zeke was stacking firewood by the wall, steam rising from his breath in the cold morning air. His shirt sleeves were rolled to his elbows, revealing arms scarred and strong. He noticed her and paused, leaning on the axe handle. "You eat yet?" I didn't think it was for me," she admitted. "It's for whoever's hungry," he replied simply, then nodded toward the stable. "You can help feed the mare if you like. She likes company more than I do." The corner of her mouth twitched. It was the closest thing to humor she'd heard from him. Over the next few days, they fell into an uneasy rhythm. Zeke worked from dawn till dusk, hunting, tanning hides, repairing tools, while Mabel cleaned, cooked, and began tending the small garden behind the cabin. She moved carefully at first, uncertain of her place, but each day the silence between them became less heavy. When she burned her hand on the stove, Zeke was the first to rush in. He took her hand gently, running cool water over the burn before wrapping it in linen. "You've got to be careful," he murmured. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, embarrassed. He shook his head. "Don't apologize for learning." Those words stayed with her long after he'd gone back outside. One afternoon, rain rolled in from the mountains, trapping them both inside. Mabel sat near the fire, mending one of Zeke's shirts. He was at the table, whittling a piece of wood into the shape of a horse. The storm raged, wind rattling the shutters, but inside the cabin it felt warm and calm. "Why do you live here alone?" she asked softly. He didn't look up. "Because I lost everything that made the noise worth it." She hesitated. "Your family?" He nodded once. "Wife and 2 little girls. 10 years ago. Caught between 2 warring tribes while I was gone hunting. I came back to ashes." Mabel's needle froze in her hand. "I'm so sorry." Zeke set down the carving, his expression distant. "I stopped talking to people after that, The world takes too much. But then I saw what your father did, and I couldn't just walk away again." The firelight flickered across his face, softening the hard lines. Mabel felt something shift in her chest. Pity, admiration, something deeper she couldn't name. Later that night, when the rain finally stopped, Zeke handed her a small cup of coffee and said quietly, "You don't have to stay forever. Once the weather clears, I can take you to the nearest town. There's a boarding house there." She stared into the cup, heart pounding. "Do you want me to go?" He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "I want you to be where you're safe." His words should have comforted her, but instead they made her ache. Safe. No one had ever cared whether she was safe before. Over the next few days, Mabel found herself watching him differently. The way he spoke softly to his horses, how he never wasted food, how he mended his old clothes instead of buying new ones. There was a quiet honor in everything he did, and sometimes, when she caught him looking at her across the firelight, she thought she saw something that wasn't pity, something closer to recognition. By the end of that first week, Mabel realized she no longer feared him. She trusted him, and in that trust, something fragile and unexpected began to bloom. Winter crept down from the mountains sooner than expected, turning the forest into a quiet world of white. Snow blanketed the cabin roof, muffling every sound except the crackle of the hearth. Mabel had never known such silence before. Not the heavy kind filled with judgment and gossip, but a peaceful hush that wrapped around her like a blanket. Each morning began with the same simple rhythm. Zeke would rise early to tend the traps and check the woodpile while Mabel brewed coffee and baked bread. When he returned, his beard dusted with frost, she would pour him a cup, and they would share breakfast by the fire. Not as strangers anymore, but as two souls who had grown used to each other's company. It was a strange, wordless comfort. Mabel found joy in small things, kneading dough, patching worn shirts, brushing snow off the horses' backs. Her body, once ridiculed as useless weight, now carried strength she'd never known. Her hands grew calloused, her arms firm. The mountains demanded effort from her, but they gave back something precious: dignity. One afternoon, while Zeke was chopping wood outside, she stepped into the cold air with a fur blanket draped over her shoulders. "Let me try," she said. He paused mid-swing, raising an eyebrow. "Splitting logs ain't easy." "Then it's time I learn." He handed her the axe carefully. "All right, show me what you've got." She hefted it awkwardly, her arms trembling at the weight. The first swing missed, the axe glancing off the edge of the log. Zeke didn't laugh. He simply stepped closer, his voice low and patient. "Not like that. Here, grip it tighter. Let the weight do the work. Don't fight it." He moved behind her, guiding her hands. His breath brushed her ear, and her pulse fluttered. She swallowed hard and tried again. The axe came down clean this time, splitting the log in two. Zeke smiled, a rare unguarded smile that lit up his rugged face. "There you go." Mabel looked at the neat halves of wood and grinned, feeling a rush of pride. For the first time in her life, she had impressed someone, not with looks, not with pretense, but with effort. That night, the two shared stew by the fire. The flames danced across the walls as the wind howled outside. Zeke sat in his chair, whittling as usual, but his eyes kept drifting to her. She wore one of his flannel shirts over her dress. It was far too large for her, yet somehow it fit perfectly. "Why do you keep looking at me like that?" she asked shyly. He set down the carving. "Because you've changed. You walk different now. Stronger." She blushed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Maybe it's this place. Or maybe it's because no one here calls me names." Zeke's voice softened. "No one should have called you that in the first place." They sat in silence after that, the air thick with warmth neither could name. As days turned into weeks, their connection deepened in quiet ways. He taught her how to shoot a rifle, how to follow animal tracks in the snow, and how to listen for wolves before they came too close. She, in turn, brought life back into the cabin, patching curtains, humming while she worked, coaxing laughter from a man who had forgotten how to smile. One evening, she found an old wooden box on a shelf. Inside were 2 tiny shoes, worn, faded, carefully kept. When Zeke saw her holding them, he froze. "They were my daughter's," he said softly. "Haven't opened that box in years." Mabel set it down gently. "She must have loved you very much." He looked into the fire, voice breaking. "She used to braid my beard while I read her stories. Every time I see snow fall like this, I think of her footprints fading in it." Mabel's eyes filled with tears. She reached out and covered his hand with hers. "You didn't fail her, Zeke. You survived, and you've been kind to me when no one else was." He turned his hand over, his rough palm closing around her smaller one. For a long moment, neither spoke. The fire crackled, snow whispered against the windows, and the world seemed to pause. Then he said quietly, "You're the first person to tell me that in 10 years." She smiled through her tears. Maybe no one else was brave enough. That night, long after she'd gone to her room, Zeke sat by the fire staring into the flames. The ache in his chest, the same ache that had lived there for a decade, felt lighter. And in the room beside his, Mabel lay awake, listening to the wind. For the first time since she was a child, her heart felt safe. Spring came to the mountains slowly, melting the snow into clear rivers and turning the forest into a sea of green. For Mabel, the cabin had become a home, the first real one she'd ever known. She had learned to plant, to ride, to survive. More than that, she had learned to live without fear. But peace never lasts forever. It started one afternoon when Zeke rode into the nearby trading post to sell furs and buy salt and coffee. He returned before dusk, his expression darker than the storm clouds gathering behind him. Mabel met him at the door, wiping flour from her hands. "Did something happen?" He hung up his coat without answering. "Someone's been asking about us in town," he said finally. "A man, mean-looking, said he's your father." The wooden spoon slipped from Mabel's hand, clattering to the floor. "He's here," she whispered. Zeke nodded grimly. "Claims you were stolen. He told the sheriff you're his property." Mabel's stomach twisted. The air seemed to grow thinner around her. "He sold me," she said hoarsely. "Everyone saw it. They laughed." "I know," Zeke said, "but men like him don't care about the truth. He's broke again, and he smells money. Thinks he can sell your story for sympathy, or worse, drag you back and sell you to someone else." She sank into a chair, her hands shaking. "He'll ruin everything." Zeke knelt beside her. "He won't touch you. I promise that." 2 nights later, as the wind howled outside, they heard hoofbeats on the frozen ground. Mabel froze. Zeke reached for his rifle, his expression unreadable. "Stay here," he said quietly. When he opened the door, Jeremiah Caldwell stood in the snow, his face gaunt. his eyes burning with greed and whiskey. "There you are," he slurred, stumbling forward. "You've got something that belongs to me." "She doesn't belong to anyone," Zeke said coldly. Jeremiah laughed bitterly. "Says the man who traded a horse for her. Don't act like a saint." Mabel appeared in the doorway, trembling but defiant. "You sold me, father. You stood in front of half the town and called me worthless," he sneered. "And yet here you are, dressed warm, living high with this trapper. Guess my worthless daughter found a way to earn her keep after all." The insult struck like a slap. Zeke's hand tightened around the rifle. "Watch your mouth," he warned. Jeremiah smirked. "You going to shoot me? In front of your new pet?" Mabel stepped forward before Zeke could speak. Her voice shook but carried steel. "You don't get to call me that. You gave up being my father when you traded me for a horse. You'll leave now." Her father's face twisted with rage. "You think you're better than me? You're nothing but a fat, ungrateful—" Zeke moved like lightning. He slammed the butt of his rifle into Jeremiah's chest, sending him sprawling into the snow. "You'll speak one more word to her, and you'll be carried down this mountain on a sled," he growled. Jeremiah gasped, wheezing, but the fire in his eyes faltered when he saw Zeke's steady aim. He stumbled backward. "This ain't over," he hissed. "I'll be back, and next time I'll have the law." He rode off into the dark, leaving only the echo of hooves and the ragged sound of Mabel's breathing. Zeke lowered the rifle slowly. "He won't stop," she whispered. "No," Zeke said, his jaw tightening, "but I'll be ready." Over the next week, tension hung heavy in the air. Zeke reinforced the door, checked his traps closer to the cabin, and cleaned his guns each night. Mabel tried to act calm, but fear gnawed at her whenever the wind carried the sound of distant horses. One evening, while she was mending his coat by the fire, she said softly, "He'll come again, but I'm not the same girl he sold that day. I won't run this time." Zeke looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the quiet strength that had grown beneath her softness. "You've got more courage than most men I've met," he said. Mabel smiled faintly. "Maybe I learned it from you." He reached out, brushing a stray curl from her cheek. His hand lingered there, rough against her skin, gentle against the fear. "Then we'll face him together," he murmured. And outside, the wind shifted, as if the mountain itself were listening, waiting for the storm that was still to come. The storm came 3 nights later. Wind howled through the canyon like a wounded beast, and snow swept across the cabin roof in furious waves. Mabel and Zeke had just finished supper when the dogs outside began to bark, deep, warning growls that froze the air in Mabel's lungs. Zeke stood instantly, hand on his rifle. "He's here," he said quietly. Mabel's pulse hammered in her ears. Through the window, she saw 3 horses approaching, her father in front, flanked by 2 rough men with shotguns slung over their shoulders. Their lanterns cut sharp lines through the snow. Jeremiah dismounted heavily, shouting over the wind, "Come out, mountain man! You got something that belongs to me." Zeke opened the door just enough for his voice to carry. "You sold her. The whole town saw it." Jeremiah sneered, his face red with drink. "I was drunk, but the law don't care. She's my blood, and you're harboring stolen property." Zeke's patience snapped. "She's a woman, not a sack of grain." Behind him, Mabel whispered, "Don't do this, Zeke. He's not worth it." Zeke glanced at her, her wide, terrified eyes, and something inside him hardened. He stepped out into the storm, snow whipping around his shoulders. You've had your say. Now turn back before I make you." Jeremiah motioned to his men. "Take her. If he fires, shoot him dead." The two thugs started forward, but they underestimated Zeke. In one fluid motion, he lifted his rifle, fired once, then swung the barrel toward the other. The first man's gun flew from his hand with a scream. The second stumbled backward as a warning shot shattered the snow at his feet. Jeremiah froze, fury and fear battling in his bloodshot eyes. "You think you can stop me?" he spat. "You can't keep her forever." Zeke took a step closer, the rifle steady in his hands. "I'm not keeping her. I'm protecting her from the man who traded her like a beast." He pointed the barrel at Jeremiah's chest. "You walk away now, Caldwell, because if you ever come back, you won't leave this mountain alive." For a long, tense moment, only the wind spoke. Jeremiah's mouth twisted, but he saw the truth in Zeke's eyes. This was no bluff. He turned sharply, mounting his horse. "You'll regret this," he snarled before riding into the darkness, his hired men scrambling after him. When the last hoofbeat faded, Zeke lowered his rifle. Mabel rushed out, snow clinging to her hair and lashes. "He's gone?" she asked, voice shaking. "He's gone," Zeke said softly, resting a hand on her shoulder. She looked up at him, tears freezing on her cheeks. "You didn't have to risk your life for me." He met her gaze, his voice rough but steady. "I didn't risk it. I chose it." For a long moment they stood in the snow, the firelight spilling from the open door behind them. Then Zeke reached out, brushing the frost from her face. "You're safe now, Mabel." She nodded, whispering, "I know, because I'm home." Spring melted the last of the snow that had buried the valley, and with it the shadows of the past finally drifted away. The cabin that once stood as Zeke's fortress of solitude had changed. Windows opened to sunlight, laughter echoing through the pine-scented air. Mabel had transformed, too. The timid girl traded for a horse had become a woman who walked with quiet pride. Her hands were strong, her eyes bright. Each morning she rode her mare, Liberty, down the ridge to fetch water or gather herbs. Each evening she returned to Zeke's side, her cheeks pink with wind and happiness. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the peaks, Zeke sat carving wood by the porch, while Mabel hung clean laundry on the line. He watched her for a long time before saying, "I never meant for you to stay this long." She smiled softly. "I never meant to find a reason to." He set the carving down, a small wooden horse, and walked to her. "You were traded for something worthless," he said, his voice low, "but you gave me back something priceless." "What's that?" she whispered. "Peace," he said simply, "and a home that feels alive again." Tears shimmered in her eyes as he took her hands. "You saved me," she said, "but you also taught me to save myself." The evening light spilled over them, warm and golden. He leaned down, kissed her gently, and for the first time in years the world felt still, whole. Inside, the fire crackled softly, casting their shadows against the wall. Two souls once broken, now mended together. And outside, Liberty neighed from the paddock, her mane glinting like sunlight, a living reminder of the trade that had begun in cruelty but ended in love. Some stories begin in cruelty, in betrayal, shame, or a father's heart gone cold, but they don't have to end there. Mabel's life began as a bargain, yet what she found in the wild was something no amount of gold or horses could buy: dignity, freedom, and love freely given. If you've ever been told you aren't enough, remember this. Worth isn't something others decide for you. It's something you reclaim when you refuse to stay broken. Tell me, where in the world are you listening from tonight? Because stories like this still find their way to hearts like yours.